Victor Wembanyama is terrifying the NBA.
I think he's the best player in the game. Is he the most valuable to his team?
A 7'4" alien from France already looks like a future MVP. Despite being so young, he's already established himself as the best defender in the entire league.
Nobody is near him as well. And it's rare when we focus on defense in the NBA. At some point, you have to play defense. And I think that's the difference with Wemby.
Like, this guy can easily stack Defensive Player of the Year awards for like the next decade. Barely been in the league, and he's already become the face of it. So let's talk about why the entire NBA is scared out of their minds because of this French dude. Let's start with the draft that changed everything.
With the first pick in the 2023 NBA Draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Victor Wembanyama.
2023, the San Antonio Spurs win the lottery, and the basketball world collectively holds its breath. Victor Wembanyama, a freak of nature from France, a croissant lover, a baguette enthusiast, becomes the first international prospect selected #1 overall since Andrew Bogut back in 2005. Naturally, the expectations were absolutely through the roof. Now, to be fair, there was a reason for the hype. Back in France, before he even touched an NBA court, Wemby was averaging 21.6 points, 10.4 rebounds, and a ridiculous 3.1 blocks per game. The guy was basically erasing a third of all shots attempted near him every single night. But here's the thing, there was still doubt. Some of it was reasonable. Wemby walked into the league at just 210 pounds. Imagine being that tall, but that light. He looked like he was just surviving on croissants and mineral water. Then there was the fact that other so-called unicorn prospects had come before him and fizzled out spectacularly. How many next Kevin Durants did we see who just faded into irrelevancy? The basketball world had been burned enough times to stay cautious. Then came the Summer League. His first game, he only got 9 points on 2 of 12 shooting, but he was putting up tour date numbers. He was labeled a bust quicker than he was labeled a generational talent. People were already writing the eulogy, overreacting to a basic Summer League game. Podcasters were rubbing their hands. Everybody was ready to call him a French bust. But Victor Wembanyama is not most people. In the very next Summer League appearance, he dropped 27 points, got 12 rebounds, and shot 9 of 14 from the field. The Spurs sat him down after that, probably because they didn't want the rest of the league to see too much too soon. Very smart from them. San Antonio had a weapon, and they weren't about to let anybody study the blueprints just yet. November 2nd, 2023. The Spurs are 5 games into the season, and Wemby had been finding his footing. A little shaky, a little inconsistent, but that's perfectly reasonable for a 19-year-old playing against grown men who had been in the league longer than some of his teammates have had driver's licenses. But then he decided he was done being reasonable. 38 points, 57% from the field, 50% from 3 in just his 5th NBA game. The entire league got very quiet and very nervous at the same time. There's something uniquely terrifying about watching a player who shouldn't physically be able to do what he's doing, yet doing it anyways, with a completely calm expression on his face.
38 and 10. Victor Wembanyama gave you 38 and 10, and this is as bad as he will ever be. From here on out, every game you see him play will be the worst he will ever look because he's only going to get better. 38 points in your 5th game, but what I love most is the growth.
The regular season kept delivering moments that made basketball fans feel like they were watching something illegal, like a customized 2K player. Against the Pistons, Wemby recorded his first ever triple-double, 16 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists, and he did it without a single turnover. That's crazy, not even one. In an NBA game where turnovers are basically guaranteed like taxes, Wemby didn't give up the ball once. And then, because apparently one triple-double wasn't enough for him, he went out against the Toronto Raptors and recorded a triple-double with blocks instead of assists. So 27 points, 14 rebounds, and he swatted away every shot that came at him. The man is genuinely built different, and that phrase has never been more accurate. Now, his rookie season was only setting up one of the most personal rivalries in recent NBA history. At least the league is trying to push it like that. I personally think Chet doesn't really care. But that's the rivalry. Victor Wembanyama versus Chet Holmgren. How did the rivalry between these two giraffes start? Well, let's rewind to 2021. The Under-19 FIBA World Championships. France versus the United States in the gold medal game. Victor Wembanyama put up 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 blocks in a gold medal game as a teenager, which is absolutely ridiculous. But the United States wins, and the tournament MVP goes to Chet Holmgren, who scored 10 points that night. Yes, 10 points. Wemby scored 22 and got the silver medal and 0 MVP votes. Now, I'm not saying the selection was wrong or right, but I am saying that if I were Victor Wembanyama, I would have thought about that every single morning when I woke up for the next 3 years. Reportedly, Wemby admitted that just thinking about it made his jaw clench. That's the kind of fuel that turns good players into generational ones. Now let's fast forward to the 2023-2024 NBA season. Holmgren, who missed what would have been his rookie year due to injury, is now healthy and playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Rookie of the Year race between Chet and Wemby becomes one of the most talked about storylines in the league, and when the Spurs faced the Thunder, Wemby treated it like a personal mission. 28 points, 13 rebounds, 7 assists. Spurs win. Rookie of the Year essentially decided, and at the end of the season, Wembanyama not only won the Rookie of the Year, but finished second in the Defensive Player of the Year voting as a 19-year-old. Yes, as a teenager. Most 19-year-olds are figuring out their college meal plans, or which party to go to get laid. This guy was almost the best defender in the entire NBA.
Most proud of, I'd say, is those unique stat lines, for example, in wins. Leading rookies in most categories and leading the league in blocks. I'm pretty proud of this.
The truly scary part, though, was what Wemby said after all of this. Despite playing on a bad team, despite the losses piling up, he stayed completely level-headed and set realistic expectations for the next season. People thought he was being arrogant when he said he's going to win all of the next Defensive Player of the Year awards, but he was actually being realistic. This guy just has a focused hunger, and that right there is what separates the great ones from the simply talented. The 2024-2025 season arrived with San Antonio doing some serious roster construction. They grabbed Stephon Castle with the 4th pick, a guard fresh off a national championship at UConn. They trade for veteran forward Harrison Barnes, and they bring in future Hall of Famer Chris Paul as a 19-year-old point guard. I'm kidding, obviously. Chris Paul is an unk. He's ancient. But his leadership was invaluable. Then we get to November 13th, 2024. 50 points from Wembanyama in 26 minutes. The fastest 50-point game in NBA history. Let that settle in for a second. 26 minutes. Most players need a full 48 just to sniff 30. Wemby dropped 50 in what was essentially a lunch break. The analysts lost their mind.
That was last episode we tried to predict the next 5 years, right? And then we had the conversation about like, oh, who's the face of the league in 2 years? There is no question who it is. It is Victor Wembanyama.
Veterans who still had a few years left in their contracts suddenly started doing retirement math in their head. But what happened next showed something even more impressive than the points, and that was the maturity. In a clutch overtime game against the Atlanta Hawks, Wemby calmly led the team on both ends of the floor. He wasn't panicking, he wasn't forcing shots, he just had composure that you simply do not expect from a 20-year-old sophomore, and his Spurs came out victorious. The hits kept coming. 42 points on Christmas Day, a dominant performance against the reigning MVP Nikola Jokic. The league was watching a player hit his stride, and it was honestly a little frightening to see. Then, as January 2025 arrived, something unexpected happened. Wemby hit a wall. 20 points here, 10 points there, only 13 points against Memphis. Suddenly people started asking, had the league figured him out? Was physicality the key? Were we watching the ceiling of him as a player? January 23rd, 2025, the Spurs land in Paris, France, for a global game against the Indiana Pacers. Wemby, back on home soil, absolutely destroyed those doubts. 30 points on 62% shooting, 11 rebounds, 5 blocks. Slump? What slump? The man simply refused to let it define him. Despite a late season injury that cut his sophomore year short, the foundation had been laid, and as the 2025-2026 season approached, things were about to get much more interesting. The offseason before his 3rd season is the stuff of legends. Banned from full contact training due to his injury recovery, Wemby decided to get creative. He trained footwork with Hakeem Olajuwon, arguably the most skilled big man in NBA history. He worked out with Kevin Garnett, whose competitive intensity is basically almost like a disease. And then he flew to China to train with the Shaolin monks. That's right, monks. I don't know what a basketball player learns from Shaolin monks exactly, but whatever it was, the results were terrifying.
The ways that he trained Victor in meditation, in endurance, these nighttime hikes that he would go on. He learned one of the Shaolin Kung Fu forms. And he was there for 12 days. 10 of them were an immersive experience, living at the temple and learning the ways of Kung Fu.
Because Wemby came into the season looking like an absolute beast. The opening night of the 2025-2026 season presented a fascinating challenge. The Dallas Mavericks debuted Cooper Flagg, the #1 overall pick, a 6'10" versatile forward who had already trained with Team USA's Olympic squad at 17 years old. The hype around Flagg was enormous, so the narratives naturally wrote itself. New phenom versus established alien. 2 #1 picks, 2 Texas franchises. Well, Wemby ended up dropping 40 points on 71% shooting. Welcome to the league, kid. The Spurs raced to one of the best starts in franchise history. Wemby was named an all-star starter, so not just an all-star, a starter.
8 months, he's been waiting for this probably longer and more thorough than anybody else. And so you saw him take the moment and play spectacular.
Which marks serious progress from his freshman year recognition. The roster around him had developed beautifully. Stephon Castle, now a legitimate star in his own right, was making life miserable for opposing point guards. Harper, the second overall pick that season, and son of five-time champion Ron Harper, added another dynamic weapon. De'Aaron Fox brought pure speed that defenses couldn't account for. But the path wasn't totally smooth. A calf strain kept Wemby out for 2 to 3 weeks mid-season. Most teams would have collapsed. Instead, the Spurs went on a 9-3 run without their best player. That's what proper roster building looks like. That's what separates smart franchises from the ones just throwing money at problems and hoping for the best. I'm looking at you, Phoenix Suns. The Oklahoma City Thunder had become the standard of excellence in the Western Conference. Frankly, the entire league, not just the West. They were the defending champions. Shea was the reigning MVP now. Their defense was historically elite, and they started the 2025-2026 season on a 24-1 run, chasing the Warriors' 73-win record. When a partially recovered Wembanyama came off the bench in the NBA Cup semifinals against OKC, he started slow. 7 points through 3 quarters, a little rusty, a little careful. The Thunder probably felt comfortable. They probably thought this was manageable. Then the fourth quarter happened. 15 points from Wemby, clutch free throw after free throw. The Thunder's win streak crushed. San Antonio advancing to the NBA Cup Finals. Even though the Spurs ultimately lost the cup to the New York Knicks, what they demonstrated against OKC sent a message louder than any trophy could.
And Wemby played spectacular. I'm happy for him. He only shot 2 threes. He took advantage of the mismatch. I was surprised.
And then they beat the Thunder again 10 days later, and then again and again. At the time, out of 5 of their losses, San Antonio had handed them 3. Nobody could stop OKC except the Spurs. They had a specific game plan and the unique personnel to execute it. Their secret was the size in the backcourt. Castle at 6'7" and Harper at 6'6" meant the Thunder couldn't hide their guards from physical penetrating attacks. De'Aaron Fox was simply too fast for anyone to contain, and Wemby is so good defensively that OKC's rim attacks just lost all of their efficiency. When Wemby's on the floor, their attempts near the basket were cut in half. That's what makes Wembanyama truly unique. It's not just the fact that he dominates games individually, it's the fact that he breaks opposing game plans structurally. The Thunder built the most efficient defense in NBA history, and Wemby's Spurs found the exact blueprint to dismantle it.
You're right. By the end of this season, we just might be saying that he's not only the best player in the NBA, but the most dominant player in the NBA as well.
February 2026. The Detroit Pistons somehow transformed from a 14-win disaster into the Eastern Conference's top seed, embracing their bad boys legacy with a physical, aggressive brand of basketball. Cade Cunningham, their star point guard, had been dominant all season. And then they ran into San Antonio. In the first matchup, Stephon Castle held Cunningham to 5 for 26 from the field. That's right, 5 for 26. Those are James Harden playoff numbers. It was a defensive masterclass. Wemby added 6 blocks, and the Spurs won comfortably. The rematch wasn't different. Cade managed 26 points, but needed 26 shots to get there. Wemby responded with 38 points and 16 rebounds. The message to the Eastern Conference was crystal clear. You want a physical game? Cool. Wemby will physically destroy you on both ends of the court simultaneously. So what do you do against this guy? That's the question every coach in the league is losing sleep over right now. He's 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan, which means he's bothering shots from people who think they're well outside of his range. He dribbles like a point guard, which means you can't just park a center on him and call it a day. Minnesota found out the hard way. He shoots threes at a legitimate efficiency, so you can't sag off him either. And when you try to be physical with him, he goes to the free throw line and knocks them down. The answer might genuinely be that there is no answer, and that's the most terrifying reality in professional basketball right now. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit. It's not like the Spurs haven't lost games. It's not like Wemby himself hasn't had bad games. But the dude is improving every single season. Like, he spent an offseason training with the greatest big man footwork teacher in NBA history. He trained with actual monks who have mastered physical discipline and mental focus. He plays for a franchise that has proven they can construct a roster specifically to maximize his strengths and hide any weaknesses. And he's only gonna get bigger and stronger, more experienced, and more dangerous. That's why the Spurs made it to a Western Conference Finals so quickly. Their star is healthy and hungry, and that's contagious to the rest of the team. The alien from France arrived with hype, but now he's leaving the entire NBA shaking like when Lizzo sits on a bed. If you enjoyed watching this breakdown of the most terrifying player in the NBA, go ahead and drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Wemby ends up as the greatest player of all time, or are we just hyping this dude too much and glazing him? See you in the next one.